So this is the first sum-up lecture that is intended to give you an overview of what we cover in the first module of the course, which is like focus on review the key elements of purchasing, the relevance for company performance, and the basic elements of the purchasing organization. So first, we'll start like talking about which is the purchasing relevance on company performance. And in particular, we have distinguished between a triple impact that the purchasing has. So we have talked about the impact of an economic performance through the purchasing and sale ratio and through the leverage effect on income statement, the financial impact to the cash flows and the cash generation cycle, and then the intangible impact through brand and image reputation, through risk, social, environment, and innovation impact. For what concerns the purchasing and sale ratio, we have simply like analyzed how today purchasing affect great part of the company income statement, because compared to sales, purchasing can represent from 25% in financial service to the 75% engineering construction of the cost in the income statement of a company. So eroding a great part of the sales and thus affecting the profit. So here you see some of the data about how the purchasing sales vary across industry, which represent the importance of purchasing independently from the context that we are considering. More in detail, we have then analyzed that purchasing is relevant not only for the magnitude of cost that it implies, but also by the fact that improving purchasing for this reason can have a good impact on the economic performance of the company, because we have analyzed how the purchasing is characterized by the so-called leverage effect. In particular, we have seen a very short example that we have also analyzed through a discussion to understand that everything was clear. If this is the starting point of a company, by reducing purchasing of 5%, a reduction in purchasing is reflecting in a reduction of inventories, which leads to an improvement on the return on asset. This improvement from the return on asset is stepping from 10% to 14%, which means 40% more than the initial values, which means that with the decrease in purchasing of 5%, we obtain an increase in the return on assets on 40%, which is an amplification of 8. That's why it's called the leverage effect, because I reduce 5, I obtain 40. The other leverage that we have is to not reducing purchases but acting on sales, and we have seen that to obtain the same value of the return on asset, we need to increase the sales of 50%. So it means that the leverage effect is no more 8, but it is less than 3, and also the fact that we have discussed that increasing sales is not so deterministic how it is reducing purchasing, because sales depend on market request. Then we have talked about the financial impact, which refers basically in how purchasing can affect the cash generation of a company, and to do that we have introduced the concept of cash generation cycle, which analyze the average lead time between supplier payment and customer payment. Is the value of the cash generation cycle for a company is determined through the sum of the throughput time, the days sale outstanding, and the day payable outstanding. In this, with this sign, in particular, we have seen what does it mean through this example. The date sales outstanding, the date payable outstanding is the average time the company takes to pay the supplier, in this case 50 days. The throughput time is the time that the product spend in the production processes, and the day sales outstanding is the average time after which the customer pay after having received the goods and the service. In our case it's 60 days, and in this case it's 30 days. We have seen that to a company, to a very simple company which operates in a supply chain made in this way, the cash generation cycle is structured in this way. At time 0, goods and services are received from the supplier and ready to be processed from the production system. At time 30, the internal process is able to deliver the final product after being spent 30 days to process and to do all the production operation. After 50 days, we have to pay the supplier because receive the goods here 50 days after, according to what we see here, we need to pay the supplier. At time 90, we receive payment from the customer, which means 60 days after we were able to deliver the final goods. For this company, the cash generation cycle is positive 40 days, which means that the company paid the supplier 40 days in advance before receiving payment from the customer, which is something which is not good, because I need to have a cash out before having a cash in. We've also discussed the fact that in this case, to improve this cash generation cycle, the easiest thing to do is to renegotiate payment term with the supplier, because again, the other option are reducing the throughput time, which requires investment and not deterministic effect according to the reaction of the production system, or try to reduce the customer days sales outstanding, which is even more risky. So the easiest solution is try to negotiate with the supplier better condition by yielding on other type of negotiation variable. But again, also in this case, supplier payment term negotiation is a purchasing lever. So also in this case, we have demonstrated that even with financial performance, the first aspects to look at if you want to improve this financial impact, this financial performance, is acting through purchasing. Finally, we'll also show that besides this tangible performance impact, purchasing has also some intangible impact that affect brand and image, like choice of supplier can lead to quality problems that can affect the brand and image of the company, like in the case of Toyota. Suppliers' behavior, which are selected by purchasing, can have social effect, like the suicide of employee in the Foxconn factory by Apple. And again, purchasing choice affect then the brand and image and the reputation of a company. Or again, Chinese supplier polluting the environment. So environmental impact, again, a choice in the supplier made by purchasing that can affect the image and the brand of the company, and so the value of the market. Finally, we've also discussed that supplier can be a source of competitive advantage because they can provide innovation that the company can then bring to the market, like in the case of Pirelli and special type of rubber that has been conceived by the supplier to realize tire which are actually used by F1, which provides Pirelli a great source of revenue. So all of these three aspects are important to be considered because purchasing affect all of these three areas in a very important ways, and improve purchasing in this area to improve company performance can be easier if compared to the exploitation of other levers. After that, we have deep dive a little bit more on purchasing characteristic by exploring which are the main purchasing elements. The point of start has been defining what is managed by purchasing, and in particular, we have first discussed the purchases giving a classification which is mainly technical or accounting, which distinguish what is managed by purchasing in raw material components, consumables, and services, which represents operational expenditure for the company, so expenditure that are classified and that are computed in the current year to which the cost is sustained by the company, with from equipment and machineries which are instead accounted as capital expenditure because their cost is spread along the whole life cycle of the goods that is supposed to provide benefits to the company during time. However, we have seen that this classification is mainly technical and or more accounting because in practice, when a company defines purchasing management and purchasing organization from a managerial perspective, usually that's not the classification that you use to take decision in the purchasing department. In particular, each purchasing department used the concept of purchasing categories. So taking all the goods and service that the company needs to buy from its supply network, these goods are grouped in an homogeneous cluster that are likely to be purchased from the same set of suppliers using the same approach in all units and countries. Basically, purchasing categories are a subset of goods and services that the company needs to buy from the supply network, which are homogeneous in terms of how the purchasing process is managed and how the supply network is designed. So they can be put together and they can form an homogeneous cluster according to which the purchasing department can be shaped and designed around. The whole list of purchasing category in a company usually realize what is called the category tree. And if you go through the slides, we have seen what the category tree is for the context of Airbus, in the context of Koenig, in the context of Unicredit, so using as a reference different industrial and service context. In particular, these are the distinctive characteristics of purchasing categories. So in a purchasing category, you group goods and services that have similar function, that have similar raw material and production process, they have similar specification, and they can be like grouped homogeneously from a managerial perspective. Again, there are some examples like printers, copiers, and facsimile machine can realize the purchasing category IT hardware. Iron, steel, and aluminum can realize the purchasing category of metals. Company car fleet, hotel booking, and flights can realize the purchasing category of travels. Poster, advertising, after goods and gadget can realize the purchasing category of marketing, goods, and service. Okay, so this gives you an idea about how this purchasing category then become the unit of analysis for the purchasing department. Then we have said that purchasing category are homogeneous in terms of how the purchasing process is managed, but what is the purchasing process? We have distinguished the purchasing process at three levels. The definition of the strategy for each category, named strategic sourcing, the identification of a supplier suitable to provide goods or service that falls within the scope of that category, named sourcing, and then the actual provision and delivery of the goods and the service that are needed to run the company process that we have named supply. And transversal to this, we have also the process of supplier evaluation. Very quickly, we have said that the objective of strategic sourcing is, and that's important, for each purchasing category, because purchasing category includes different goods and service, which for each need to define a specific purchasing category strategy. So we cannot define, we can give strategic guidelines which are available for everyone, but then when it's up to define the supply network, its characteristic, and the supplier relationship management characteristics, these aspects need to be defined and tailored for each purchasing category. In particular, which are the activities that lead to the identification of this strategy? First, design of the characteristic of the supply network, which means number of supplier, type of supplier, and location of supplier. Then associate names to this network configuration ideal characteristics. So it means doing supply market analysis to scout for name of suitable supplier that will fit in this network. Then, once I have names, I need to ask myself, okay, but if I have to activate one of these, which are the type of relationship that I want to have with this one? So, long-term, short-term, which are the main contract conditions that I want to negotiate with them, which falls within the activity of supplier management. And finally, of course, at the strategic level, I need to answer myself, okay, once I know the characteristic of the network, the name that can be included in this network, how I would manage a relationship with a supplier in this network once activated, also how I would evaluate the supplier in order to understand if it is performing in a good or in a not desired way. Then the strategy establishes the characteristics of the network, the name of the suppliers, the approach and the evaluation, and the type of relationship. Now, imagine that a request for purchase, so a request coming from the final user for a specific needs of good and service come to the purchase department, there is the need to give the user these goods and to give or service, and to give the user these goods or service, we first need to select one of the suitable supplier that is able to deliver these goods and service. This is made through sourcing. So the request for purchase is first translated in specific definition, so some requirements that can be communicated to the supplier, to the possible supplier that we consider suitable to satisfy this request. They are all asked to make a request for quotation, so price and condition for the supply. If I don't identify any supplier which is suitable to satisfy the request, I can redo market analysis to see if further suppliers are present to be included in the supply network. In this case, once I receive the quotation for the supplier, I need to establish some selection criteria that lead me to a selection of the supplier that can happen through further negotiation of condition. The point of arrival is the establishment of a contract. Once I've established a contract, I can ask for the supplier of a specific contract to deliver the goods and the service that the user is asking for. So the first step is issuing to the supplier a purchase order. The supplier will send the goods and the service. I will receive the goods and the service, and I will control the quality in order to check that everything is okay. If everything is okay, I will pay the supplier, and in this process I'm also able to evaluate the operational aspect of the supply, so quality, time, flexibility, the price, which are then included in the evaluation process that you have established at the strategic sourcing level. The final point of arrival is, of course, the goods or the service delivered to my facilities. Finally, in order to execute the procurement process, we have described the fact that we need a procurement organization. And the procurement organization, to be designed, needs the specification of three aspects: span of control, micro-level organization, and level of centralization. For what concerns the span of control, we have seen that simply the purchasing process is made by three activities, three sub-processes, but these three sub-processes not always are executed by the purchasing department. The more the purchasing department is responsible and is direct managing all these processes, the higher is the span of control of this department. So department that just manage the supply part of the process have a low span of control. Department that manage the whole process, so from the strategy definition to the management of operational activities, will have an higher span of control. The second aspect is how I organize resources in my purchasing department. And in doing this, we have split two different approaches. The input approach simply divides people in the purchasing department and specialize them according to the category that these people have to buy. This is called an input approach, which basically I have category manager, so responsible for each purchasing category, to which some buyer report. So in this case, we have buyers and category managers specialized in specific category that they have to buy. The objective here is to obtain efficiency and bargaining power, because each office will manage the whole demand coming from all the areas, all the product, all the project, all the customer for that specific category. This approach is opposite from the output approach, which wants instead to group criteria using an output perspective, or according to the geographical market areas where the company operates in, or according to the products or the project the company relies. Basically, in the first case, it means that in the purchasing department, people are no more grouped according to the category that they have to buy, but they are grouped for the geographical areas in which the company operates. So in each office, every people will buy all the goods and services, so different purchasing categories, all the ones that are required by each area. Same for product and project. So for product and project, I group people, I have dedicated buyer that manage goods and service for the production of specific products sold, project executed, or customer served. So in each department, I can manage more purchasing categories. How many? All that are needed to realize a product or realize a project or serve a particular customer. Input approach. The purchasing department manage different categories and I need specialization in this category, so each resource just manage one category to specialize in this category. Output approach, each people can manage different categories because I want them to specialize not on the input but on the output. The geographical areas I operate in and or the products or the project I need to realize. And this is evident from this representation. So in this case, you see that here you have 3 offices, one grouping people managing category 1, one grouping people managing category 2, one grouping people managing category 3, so people are specialized by category. Input. Here, people are specialized by market, so each resource is grouped in an office, in a market office like US, Europe, Asia. And each office manage all the categories that are requested by production in these areas. So buyers are no more specialized in the category but are specialized in the market. Same here. The buyer and the category manager, in this case will be a product manager, are grouped in the same office, but they can manage more categories. So they are not just more specialized in input, but they are specialized in the output. So each resource specializes in buying goods and services, so different categories for the product in which this category they will be included. Finally, we have talked about the level of centralization, which means basically discriminating the decision between having a centralized purchasing department buying goods and service for all the other departments and all the other plants of the company, or like separating, localizing the purchasing department in order, especially for global company, to buy in a tailored way and get local needs. We have differentiate some models. In particular, the first one is the totally centralized model, while procurement is a first level organizational chart department centralized and at the same level of production and marketing. Then we have talked about a second possible model of centralization. We still have procurement as a central department, first level of the organizational chart at the same level of production and marketing, but especially when companies has production plant spread all over the world, it's nice to have procurement people localized in near production in order to be able to understand which are the real production needs and report them to the central procurement department. So in this case, this is not decentralization, meaning that the procurement people here are still reporting to the central procurement department, they are just delocalized. So this is not a further procurement office reporting to production, it is simply a person, one or more, 2, 3, depending on the people, that are delocalized near the plant that reports to the central procurement department, that realize a local procurement office, which is part of the central one, which the aim to understand more production needs. According to the centralized model, instead we have the traditional local procurement, which is instead here we don't have a central procurement department, so here there is no central procurement department. For each production plant generally, or for each area where there are production sites, there is a local procurement department that usually depends on production, so second level of the organizational chart, where there are tailored purchases of goods and services that can support production, and each office just see the local demand coming from the area which is supposed to serve. Then there is another option, which is the hybrid decentralized model, where we still have a central procurement department, which is basically in charge of managing shared purchasing category. like all the goods and services that are shared across the different companies area, like cleaning service, marketing service, like equipment and machineries, or office supply, office furniture, so everything that is just shared. The request is similar across different plants and departments, can be centralized in the central procurement office. While instead everything that is very production specific, technical, and needs contact with like production engineer and production people can be localized. Pay attention that in this case the local procurement office here has no any connection with the central procurement office. This is just a localized procurement office reporting to production, and is production telling this local procurement what to buy and how to buy that, with no relationship with the central procurement department, which is instead something different to what was happening here, because in this case production has no responsibility and no control on the procurement office. Is just like a favor that procurement does in delocalizing some people to get more production needs and buy more tailored goods and services that are able to support production activities.